Welcome to the February 9th meeting of the Granville Executive Village School District Board of Education meeting. It's 6:30. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take the roll, please. Dr. Kornman here. Ms. Deeds here. Mr. Janice
Here.
Mr. Miller
Here.
and Dr. Rintel is not here present yet.
Do shortly.
Commendations.
Excellent.
All right, good evening. Tonight we are going to start by saluting the hardworking members of the snow team. They are the tired individuals that look like they're up in front here, who drive the roads in our school district on the morning when weather conditions are often hazardous. They provide information on how safe it is for school buses, school drivers, and staff to travel. And this helps me, the superintendent, decide whether school is delayed or canceled. It is truly a team effort. Kim and I go back and forth on a regular basis on what we think is best for our kids. Not only do we factor in what happens to our buses, but we have to factor it in for our student drivers. And remember, when we're putting 16-year-olds in a car to drive to school, we take that very seriously because sometimes they don't have the experiences that we do when driving in adverse conditions. So I want to thank and salute their efforts. Joe Liff, Larry Holbrook, Dina Kilworth, Terry Kornman, Terry Hopper, Forrest Fairburn, and Kim Clary. So please come up and receive your commendation for your service. We're going to take a picture.
Okay, you just got to get back up. You have to go surround track. Oh, no, trust me. You have to go up there.
All right, we're going to stand right over here, and she's going to take a picture. Oh, you're going to put me right in the We appreciate everything that you do. And I will tell you, you make my job really easy because I know that you've done a thorough job of getting out and checking all the problem areas. A lot of people think Central Ohio is pretty flat, but we have a little bit of terrain here in Granville and people don't necessarily take that into account. And we have some outlying areas that can blow over very quickly and get pretty treacherous. So I appreciate all of your efforts. So thank you. Next, the board would like to commend the members of our Heart Safe Accreditation Committee, who brought this important initiative to our district. Last fall, Granville Schools began implementing a program designed to increase awareness of sudden cardiac emergencies and to devise an emergency response plan within each school. We appreciate their efforts and invite these dedicated committee members to come up and be recognized, but I want to talk a little bit more about that. So this initiative actually started with two parents. They're going to come up here soon. And I think it's important because, you know, when we talk about the education of a child, it's the parents, the schools, and the community working together in the best interest of children. And I think these parents and our team at the school and then our broader community support with the fire department is a perfect example of that tripod working effectively for the safety of our students. So I'd like to recognize Amy Petrick, Ann Verasso, Gina Burdick, Fire Chief Jeff Hussey, and his son Ryan Hussey, Lauren Fisher, Lee Priano, Mike Duncan, Shelby Gall, and Summer Thager. And did I miss anyone? Laura, let's see, who did I miss? Did I miss anyone? Okay, everybody come on up.
We could just stay for a picture.
Where this kid, Brown?
Were you trying the wrong way?
No, I definitely want to see this pin out of the other one. And when I say a committee, look at how many people are involved. All right, so kind of wrap around here as much as possible. You're tall enough.
Okay, that's good. Tony, you should be in here. Oh, I'm a photographer. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Good job. Great.
And I
Thank
was-
you very much.
Thank you. So that gives me the opportunity to talk a little bit about Tanya, who is new to our organization this year, and she's really been the chairperson and coordinated the efforts of this team. And last week, we actually did our first drills at each of the buildings, and we learned a lot about what we do well and what we could improve upon. And I think when you're trying to build a culture of continuous improvement, it's always about how can we get better. And every member of that committee helped us get a little bit better that day. And hopefully, we never have to use it, but if we do, then we will be better prepared in the end. So thank you. We appreciate that. All right. Each year, the Coughlin Automotive Group honors one teacher from each district in Lincoln County with the You Make a Difference Award. For 2015, the Granville Schools honoree is Barb Lotter, who teaches family and consumer science at Granville Middle School. Barb will receive a framed certificate and $500 cash at a recognition luncheon or evening event in March. She was nominated by one of her students, Debbie Bigley, with help from Mom, Suzanne, for going above and beyond in her dedication to students and commitment to the community service projects that she leads. Congratulations, Barb, and please come forward and accept this award. And please, Debbie, come on up with her. And you'll notice that Barb has had a little bit of an incident. You know, usually you see one person with a cast on one hand or arm. Barb did a doozy. So congratulations, Barb. Well deserved. All right. Last month, we had the Inspired by the Dream art show and Feed the Dream food drive that were wildly successful in celebrating the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. And I'm going to point out the What is Your Passion to Serve display that was part of the art show, where a lot of the community members got to write what their passion to serve was on that board. And we didn't know where to put it, but I said, you know, we have a couple of empty walls at district office. So I had them bring it here. It's actually really heavy because I helped them move it. And we're going to probably put it up along this wall over here. There were so many volunteers who made this event happen, but one Granville Middle School student stood out. Mason Knight embraced the theme of Find Your Passion to Serve. He dedicated hours setting up and taking down the art displays on Sunday, January 18th, and then volunteered at the food drive for at least 6 hours on the Martin Luther King holiday. And I will tell you, you know, as warm as it was this year, warmest it's ever been, it's still pretty cold. Chief provides a little heater, but it's not, you know, doesn't warm up the entire area. So Mason is also featured in a video about the art show on the Columbus Dispatch website. He captured the essence of service to the community, and he exemplified making it a day on rather than a day off. Please join the board and me in applauding Mason Knight. Take a picture too if you want. So. here. Okay, you got a picture? Yes. All right. Thank you. I have to say, there were a lot of people in this room that helped put that art show together, and spending time with kids outside of the classroom or outside of the school environment, you really get to know a little bit about them, and it's one of the reasons why I enjoy it and spend a lot of time on the weekends doing that. And this is just one example of the quality of students that we have in Granville Schools. So Mason did a tremendous job, and it was nice getting to know you a little bit more. So congratulations, and that concludes the board commendation. Okay. Now, this is the point where I say you can all leave. We do have to conduct the rest of our business, but if you would like to stay, you are more than invited to stay. However, usually people hit the exit really quickly.
Thanks.
Somebody's got to keep track of you.
Good. Pleasure to meet you. Great work, Mason. Thanks. Mason's on the Science Olympiad team. Our first year we've done Science Olympiad at the middle school. And so I got to go and help out today after school. And Becky's doing projects and Mason's there working away as well. They've got some great things they're working on. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Barb. Take care. Congratulations.
Thank you. See you, Jay.
Okay. Staff reports?
Okay. Now I have to wet my whistle and keep going. All right, really I have two updates for you. Both recently introduced bills. The first one that I'm going to talk about is Senate Bill 3. It was introduced by Senators Height and Faber. It really is related to Dr. Ross's recommendations that he gave the governor prior to, I think, December 31st. And they've been recently publicized on ODE's website. It really addresses the testing recommendations and limiting the volume of assessments, both at the state and district level. So I'm going to read through some of the highlights slash lowlights of the policy or the proposed recommendations. The first one, it limits the cumulative amount of time spent on the administration of the state assessments to 2% of the school year, beginning with the 15-16 school year. So again, most of this is affecting next year, the state assessment system. It also limits the amount of time being used for taking practice tests, diagnostic assessments to prepare students for the state assessments up to 1% of the school year, beginning with the 15-16 school year. I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between state and district level assessments, and Mr. Bernath in his conversation around assessment is going to highlight this as well. State assessments are really programmatic reviews. They should be interesting validation of assessment data that teachers are collecting along the progression of the school year. And the district level is a little bit above that. It's really more grade level conversations about how students are progressing. You can look at individual students a little bit more clearly. And then state assessments are, again, more broader or a broader representation of school performance. I think the caution that I have leading into this is that a lot of the local assessment that we do really drives instructional change, and that's what we want to promote. And so we don't necessarily want to limit that, but some of the assessment that we do is required to fulfill other state obligations, like identification of students that are potentially going to be retained for third grade reading guarantee or something like that, or the identification of gifted students. So there are some other assessments that take place that are related to other mandates that we have to follow. It exempts from time limitation assessments administered to students with disabilities, and then if a student does not fail or does fail to meet the reading guarantee or an end of course exam, it gives them alternative assessment options, okay? It requires, it does retain the diagnostic assessments for kindergarten through third grade assessments 1 through 3, so that we can do the K-3 literacy measure. That's something that the state is still reinforcing. It's diagnostic in nature. We already had do that through MAPS assessment, and that's what we use for our third grade literacy measure. It requires that we administer the English language arts assessment to third graders at least once annually instead of twice under the current law. Again, in third grade we give the fall OAA and the spring OAA. This would limit the assessment to once. It also has some exemptions for high-performing school districts, which we are under, we do fall into that category. So there are some requirements regarding the third grade reading guarantee, and if students don't meet that threshold, that they have to be taught by a certain qualified teacher, and it would remove that provision for high-performing school districts. It would remove some requirements within teacher licensing, mentoring, the use of the resident educator, and class size restrictions. So there are some things written in here that I really don't know how ODE will create the business rule around them, but there are some exemptions for high-performing school districts. The definition it defines is a school district that first has at least 85 of the total possible points for performance index score, which we do, an A for performance indicators met, which we do, and at least 93 to 95% of the 4- and 5-year cohorts for graduation, for the graduation rate respectively. So I think all those we have met, so we would fall into that exemption category. This is an interesting aspect. It would require the School Facilities Commission to develop and submit to the General Assembly a legislative proposal that would assist high-performing school districts to receive funding under the Classroom Facilities Assistance Program. Typically, we do not qualify for Facility Commission revenue because we do not have a demographic that puts us into that high-need category. And so this would potentially give us the ability to access some School Facility Commission revenue to potentially buy technology or infrastructure needs, which would be advantageous for us. And then it would increase the competitive bid threshold for school buildings and repair contracts from $25,000 to $50,000. So a little bit higher threshold. So those are the provisions of Senate Bill 3. Again, this is coming from Dr. Ross's recommendations at ODE. It'll be interesting to see how this moves through committee and gets tweaked and or applied from a business rule perspective once passed. So we keep our eye on this piece of legislation. Questions about this one?
That was just introduced, right?
It was.
So it's still in committee.
It is. It was just introduced.
Right, and could change.
And so I am sitting on an advisory board for Representative Hayes, who is the education chair this year. And so we will be talking about many of these proposed pieces of legislation.
You have a sense, it talks about a cumulative limit of 3%, 3% for the actual test and 1% for practices. There's some sort of national data that suggests that testing is about 1 to 3% of the time.
Right.
Do you have a sense about whether, as a state, we're well in excess of that 3% now?
I think, I don't believe that we're in well in excess, but I think we're pretty close to, well, we're a little bit above that threshold right now. I think the challenge has been, it's been a double-edged sword for teachers. They're being asked to prepare kids for a new type of assessment, and so they're doing some of the skill development, so the kids that can be successful on the test, like how to navigate an online environment, how to, move and click rulers or calculators, and some of that's being perceived as test prep, but really it's getting kids prepared for the type of assessment that they have to take. Again, I don't think that that's going to have to continue at the magnitude that it's taken place this year because everything's new. But I would say, Ryan, what did we say that the decline, it would be roughly an 18% shift in the amount of time that we're currently allocating versus next year. Is that accurate?
Some grade levels, it would be upwards of 10 hours.
Yeah.
From this year to next?
Correct.
Once you establish sort of a baseline?
Correct. Yeah. So I think, once again, we're getting kind of accustomed. This is a baseline year. We're kind of using this as a safe harbor environment. Again, things that Ryan's going to talk a little bit about in his report on kind of an assessment update so you understand what we are and are not doing. But I think it is a reduction. My challenge is that let's make sure that we're really limiting the assessments that aren't as relevant to the individual students' strengths and weaknesses and needs in our classrooms. Any other questions?
I guess just a comment, it's relatively early stage with this and so forth, but I'm pleased that, some of the committee and Dr. Ross's recommendations are going through there, specifically the ones that impact us, I think, relative to changing the exemptions for high-performing districts, right? I think that opens up a lot of possibilities for us, and I'm not sure which of those will ultimately filter out into law and so forth. But the more flexibility that we can get and the more relief we can get from some of the constraints and so forth, I think it really could be positive. So thanks for your help and work on it.
I think
to make those happen.
One of the messages that we have been saying for years is do not apply policy unilaterally. It's not a one-size-fits-all environment. If there are some school districts that don't have watch list process or aren't doing their due diligence in diagnostics, then really enforce those provisions. But for those that can demonstrate that they have those systems in place and that they're working effectively, then release us from some of the mandate language that could be problematic for us. And so I think this is an attempt to do that. It will be interesting to see how that unfolds. Yeah.
But anything we can do to support, let us know.
Yes. Thank you. All right. The next piece of legislation is a little bit more, I would say, ambiguous and a little bit more difficult to understand. House Bill 7, is it Bucci? Butchie?
It's actually pronounced beachy.
Beachy. I thought it was something like that. It also has to do with assessments, but it prohibits public schools from utilizing at any time during the student's academic career a student's score on any elementary, state assessment, or high school end-of-course exam that was administered this year. So it's reinforcing that safe harbor for students as a factor in any decision to retain the student, promote the student to a higher grade level, or grant course credit. There are some challenges with that, but I think what they're trying to say is this is a new assessment, and we want to use it as baseline information, and we don't want any high stakes related to that. It's challenging because some of these assessments are linked to high school graduation in the graduation requirements. So again, we're going to have to figure that out as we go along if this were to pass as is. Again, all of these will go through committee and probably change quite a bit. I think the other question mark relates to the next provision, which prohibits the release of individual student score on a state elementary assessment or high school end-of-course examination administered this year, except to the student's school district or school for the student or the parent or guardian. Well, the challenge with that is in order to accomplish a norming process, the state needs this data. And so does the vendor, that is AIR and Park, both need the information in order to go through the norming process. So it's unclear how they would conduct that process if the information isn't going to the state. And maybe it's what they mean by individual student data. Maybe there's an aggregate upload, but I'm not sure. Don't have enough information about that, but that's intriguing to me. They also want to give the ability, if a student has already taken a course and they didn't take the end of course examination because it wasn't available, they can take it at a later time if it's available at that point. If it was, they had previously taken the course. Again, I think some of that is related to if there's a graduation requirement that a student is now held to and they haven't taken the assessment, give them the opportunity to take the assessment. Authorizes students to retake end of course examinations at any time during the student's academic career. Currently, students have multiple opportunities to pass the OGT. And so I think that's getting into that retake orientation towards the end of course exams. And then it requires the State Board of Education to adopt rules to implement the bill's provisions regarding the retaking and excused delay in taking of the end of course examination. So I think that's just a restating of earlier provisions. And it declares it an emergency, which means that it would be, once the bill is passed, it goes into effect immediately, it doesn't wait for the 90 days. So that's House Bill 7. This representative did send out a survey to all superintendents, so I will be providing feedback to him related to the provisions. And I think, again, the notion is that we want to potentially not have a high stakes penalty for a student that's taking a brand new assessment.
But what about those who do pass?
Well, good for them. And
then they have to take it again?
no, they shouldn't have to take it again. But I think it says,
Can't be included.
retain the students or promote the students to a higher grade level. What does that mean? If I pass the geometry end of course exam and I'm going to take Algebra 2 next year, does that fall into the promotion
Right.
language? So yes, again, all of it, the devil's in the details when it comes to policy language. So those were very newly introduced, and I have a feeling that we're going to see a couple more, and that doesn't even include the policies, mandates that are education related in the budget bill. So those are two things that are coming out of more of ODE's recommendations. So that's my report, but I'm going to then turn it over to Mike to kind of give you a little bit of an analysis of the budget, even though we still don't have the specific language, but it's good to see Mike back here, and so he's got a little bit of an update for you related to that.
As Jeff said, we don't have budget language, so we're kind of working with at least one thing tied behind our back, trying to figure out what's going on. I've heard from several sources that language should be available Wednesday or Thursday, that the bill will actually be introduced, and we'll be able to start analyzing that more closely. The two main issues that are moving funding around are, one has no impact on us at all, the other one has a huge impact on us. The one is you're proposed to be getting the phase out of the tangible personal property reimbursement. We lost all of ours in the first phase out. So really, we get about $10,000 that goes towards our PI fund and towards our half mil levy. We could lose part of that, but all we have to risk is $10,000 out of the capital budget. The bigger change you know, the administration has kind of said, well, we're tweaking the formula. I don't think this is really a tweak. It's a pretty fundamental change, and that's with the income factor. In the current formula that was passed 2 years ago, the income factor only comes in if it makes the district poorer. If it makes the district wealthier, it's ignored, and there's just a property index. Well, of course, you know, we're fairly property wealthy, but we're really income wealthy. And so the adding in of the income factor is driving down our state share index. According to the administration, the printouts that they've done, our index, which this year is 33.4%, meaning of the $5,800 per pupil, the state gives us 33.4% of it. We're expected to make up the rest. Would drop to 31.6 next year, which is actually leaves us in a better spot than our 5-year forecast says. Because I was assuming just from the operation of the current formula, we'd drop, I think, a little below 31 instead of plus. We're actually a little better off in the first year. But in the second year, the calculation they have put out intuitively does not make sense. I haven't been able to reconcile it, and I've seen several other districts that where the same thing is it drops down to 25%. Even though the income factor is being phased in over 5 years, equal intervals, and I believe, although I haven't seen anything, right now if it uses the income index, it's a 2/3 property, 1/3 income mix, and using that mix, I was able to reconcile to the 31.6 for next year. But then when I calculate out 2017, I get something a little bit above 29. And they're saying it's 25. And that's a huge difference. One of two things is going on here. Until we see language, we don't know what. Either there's something else going on in the formula that no one has mentioned that's causing that big drop. Is a possibility. Or there is a miscalculation in the printouts that came out. Because no matter how I tried to get to that 25%, I couldn't come close to it without making just absolutely outrageous assumptions. And so I did email Director Keene on Friday and asked him if something's going on or he may want to check their calculations. I have not heard back from him since I emailed him. I'm actually kind of not surprised because I think they're trying to stay away from printouts as much as possible. The printouts have caused them a lot of concern. The same as 2 years ago. A lot of Appalachian districts are not faring very well in this one. And what I think most people don't realize is the reason they're not faring well is because of the income factor, which intuitively makes no sense because they're all dirt poor. But remember, it's relative. And so income-wise, they're, you know, if you see the document I handed out, kind of Springwood, which is one of the poorest districts in the state, down in Athens County. Well, if you look at their average per pupil valuation and their median taxpayer income, the per pupil valuation is just under $50,000, and the statewide is about a little over $140,000. So they are more than 50%, 60-70% from the average there. The 26,000 median income, which is really low, is only about 20-25% below the median statewide. So because it's relative within the district, when you add the income index in, it's jacking their overall index way up because the wealth index is bringing it up substantially. And this is happening in a lot of places through Appalachia. And And that has not gone over very well, especially when you look at the chairman of the House Finance Committee, who is a former school board member from Appalachia, and all but 2 of the districts within his House district are losing money, which is really not a good way to make friends. Proposal. And so the proposal's been met with a lot of skepticism and a lot of disbelief that these results are coming out again. And so it's having adverse impacts on districts like that and then districts like us. Districts who are, we're above average on property wealth, but we're way above average, or way above the median in income level. But what we've seen, and what I saw in 2017 with that large drop, you see that in other places. One of the districts in here is Springboro, which, with their property and income mixes, are very similar to ours. Their property value per pupil is a little bit lower, their income's a little bit higher, and their drop from 16 to 17 is 2 to 3 times what it was from 15 to 16. Again, which shouldn't be possible if the only thing that's impacting it is an identical phase in the second year as the first year. And so, that's where it is right now. Because the phase-in is taking place over 5 years, rather than all at once. If you remember the communication I had a couple weeks ago that said if it happened all at once and went to the income factor, in our calculation we would lose $1.9 million of state aid. I think what now is going to be is we're going to lose $1.9 million in calculated state aid, but it'll take 5 years to get there rather than all at once. And then, there's guarantees in there, but once we get to the end of the 5-year phase-in, my guess is we'll be somewhere between $1 million and $1.5 million on the guarantee. As opposed to right now, we're slightly on the cap and it's projecting us to be on the formula. And then if the guarantee structure that the governor has proposed in the past and stays in place is already in place, the $1 million to $1.5 million we would lose over a period of probably 4 to 5 years, beginning after 2020. And so eventually, 9, 10 years down the road, under this system, we probably would lose $1.9 million from where we otherwise would have been. We've been communicating this to stop making after. We just released this morning. It has gone. I sent it to Representative Hayes this afternoon. It's gone to Colleen Grady, who is the House, the Speaker's Education Policy Committee. It's gone to Representative Smith, who's the chair of the House Finance Committee. And so it's getting out there. It's, a lot of what you see in here is counterintuitive. The results they're getting are counterintuitive. So that's really the big change. Everything else, again, without language, it's hard to tell. It looks like they beefed up the poverty assistance some. That, of course, does not really help us in our formula, but it looks like they've done that. It's hard to tell what they've done with special education at this point because it's just buried in the base appropriation. So again, until we see detail, we won't know what's in there or any of the other programs.
I think,
that's really about all we know until we can analyze the bill.
Right. And I think it's important to note that, this is the governor's budget introduction, and it will go through quite a few tweaks before it actually becomes the budget that we'll be living by. I think, with Mike's advocacy and all of our advocacy to have a funding formula that doesn't necessarily penalize us twice, for property wealth and income wealth, I think we could, probably fare a little bit better. So we'll continue those efforts to advocate on behalf of Granville and Granville schools and students and staff and community, and we'll see how it pans out.
Last week I had conversations with Representative Hayes, and I told him what I thought was going on, and she thought was crazy. And that is what's going on. I talked for quite a while with Scott Ryan. He's not on education or finance, but he's still, a good ally to have. And so, they kind of understand they kind of get what's going on. I'm probably going to meet with Representative Hayes probably in the next couple of weeks. It's mostly waiting to the point where I'm sure I can be mobile and drive and things like that. So I'm hoping to set something up with him by the end of the month. I'd like to have a chance to analyze the budget bill and truly understand especially what's going on in 17. And, if those are correct calculations, we're going to have to see what other change they're making besides just phasing up the income tax, which they've got to do something else that second year, unless the grant.
And I saw the online article in the Sentinel today where you had a couple comments and things like that. Can you make just some brief comments on what the implications could be to Granville property taxes, or what the timing of this would be, just so we get that on the record?
I don't think it's going to affect the timing of a levy. Okay, let me take that. I don't think it's going to cause us to have to go on the ballot before 2018. It would make it less likely we could stretch it much beyond 2018. And the real impact would be, as we have to size the next levy, is we're going to have to account for a continued decrease in state aid moving forward after 2018.
Okay.
Once we have the details, we'll be able to pretty well simulate what it's going to look like through fiscal 19 or 20. But until we have that, it's kind of hard because we still don't know exactly what's going on.
I guess there's two things about it that sort of don't surprise me. One is that the numbers are kind of goofy, right? Because every time you change the formula a little bit, you don't kind of anticipate all the unintended consequences. So I think that has to all settle out, and we shouldn't make too much until we really understand that. The other thing that doesn't really surprise me is it's not necessarily in any of the projections going to be great for Granville in terms of more state aid, right? And I think that's a continuing trend that we've seen over time, right? That we sort of need to expect to continue, that there's a natural shifting of the tax burden to support education from the state to the local communities, right? And it makes me very happy to be here in Granville, where I know we have great support of our schools and we have fantastic schools, but it's going to just reinforce that we need to continue to do the great things that we are, right, and get the community support that we need, because it could be very significant in terms of what the changes are, whether they're intended or not, or whether they're, a couple years out or 4 or 5 years out. There's big changes that are a part of a continuing trend.
What is happening to us was exactly what was intended. What's happening to places like Trimble and Alexander and Huntington, these really poor districts, I think was not intended.
Right.
Huntington, which is about the poorest district in the state, their state share index goes down so much that to replace the state dollars, that they're going to lose just over 2 years, if the numbers are right, they would need over a 9-mil levy. For us it's a couple. If you're going to try and replace it, it's a bill maybe. At the end of 2 years, but not.
Right.
Yeah, it's much more significant in places down. And so and you can actually see that by the graph that's on the last page. And what that's showing is, this is of the 286 districts that are losing money. It's showing from lowest to highest wealth based on income, based on median income, the millage rate required to replace the lost state revenue. And you can see it has a downward slope to it, which makes no sense, basically saying if you're poorer, you're going to have to pass more millage to make up for your losses that you probably shouldn't be getting anyway.
I thought
With the exception of the far right end of the curve, which
Yeah.
is where Granville falls.
Right.
No,
No?
we are not, yeah, we
Yeah.
don't want them at the far, but we are not,
Not quite.
yeah, we're not that last district though, we're not up in the 6 mil range.
Yeah, but there's a clump of them there at the end
Yeah. Right.
that seemed to be an anomaly, right? Which maybe was intended or not.
There's a handful of districts like us that the state share percentage gets chopped significantly.
Yeah.
You know, in the end, again, this is what I calculated a couple of weeks ago, we would go from 33.4 at full implementation down to 22. And that's, you know, that's essentially a third of our state funding. And Springboro had a very similar drop in their state share index, 11, 12 points.
Where does Granville fall in this curve in terms of median income? Do you know what our median income number is?
Our median income is just over 60,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of those little,
Yep, right there at the cluster.
it's in that 3 to 5% millage
Yep.
needed
Yeah.
area, which is big for not having anything more. That's huge.
Other questions?
Glad you clarified that chart. I thought it was my EKG after hearing the governor's proposal. So thank you for clarifying that. Yes. One or the other.
The budget bill doesn't get finalized till June, so we
Correct.
have some time to advocate.
I think there's a very good chance what comes out of the House in late March or early April will look nothing like what went into the House or will be going into the House this week. I think there's enough pretty universal unhappiness.
Well, thank you, Mike. As always, you do a great job in
Yeah.
helping us understand these formulas. And I feel very lucky that we have you and people like Peg also in the community that actually advocate for our community. So thank you.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Bernath for an assessment update, kind of piggybacking on what I talked about in the legislative conversation. Do you want me to turn off the lights?
Can you turn the heat up, please?
Turn the heat up? Yes, absolutely.
We're trying to save money. Okay, yeah. No, go back.
Some of this is redundant from what Jeff said, so if I skip over a part, I just don't want to say it twice, because he elaborated on some of this as we went through the different House bills and Senate bills that are being proposed. So I want to start off tonight just giving a very brief overview. This has changed so much in the last year, I think sometimes even I have a hard time keeping track of who's doing what and so forth. So 2 test companies, vendors that are making these different tests. One is Park, one is Air. You can see how they get their names there. Park is math and English language arts, and in math, students will take a Park assessment here in a couple weeks, starting in February, in grades 3 through 8, plus Algebra 1 and Geometry, whether that's Algebra 1 and Geometry in the middle school or high school, whenever they're in that course. Those are graduation tests for the 9th graders and below in those subjects, and students are not double tested. So if you have an 8th grader who's taking Geometry this year, they will just take the test of the subject that they're in. They don't have to take the 8th grade test as well. The English language arts, you'll notice this is grades 4 through 8 plus English 9. English 9 is the graduation component. The 3rd grade is taking the OAA, and that was a relatively recent change by the legislature that got rid of the 3rd grade Park assessment because you had students taking the OAA who hadn't reached a passing score for the 3rd grade reading guarantee, and the other students were going to take the Park assessment. They didn't want students taking 2 different assessments at the end of that grade level, which is a wise move on their part. The AIR tests are science and social studies, grades 5 and 8 for science, plus biology or physical science, whatever course a student happens to be in. The quirky thing about this year is that the physical science test is the graduation requirement. The biology test is not ready. So the biology test will be the test moving forward starting next year, but it's not ready for this year. So the only students at the high school that will be taking the science test is the one class of physical science that we have. They will be able to take the biology test next year, and if they reach a passing score on either it or the biology, we should be able to use either one, although those rules have not been determined completely yet, but that's what we're hoping for. Social studies piece, it's grades 4 and 6 plus U.S. government, or U.S. history and government. The U.S. history piece is the graduation requirement. And there was legislation passed last year that when they made these tests, that every student, whether they're a freshman or not, has to take the history and government test. So we will have a few sophomores who are taking history this year because they didn't take it last year. Most of those students have moved in recently, so they didn't take history at their previous school, so now they're taking it. They will have to take that test, and the government will have a few seniors and maybe a couple sophomores taking it as well. Again, that's required by state law. So that's just kind of a brief overview of the two different types of tests and who's taking them and what companies are involved.
Quick question.
Sure.
So those students taking biology this year are only going to have the opportunity to take the graduation requirement a year after they finish?
They will not have to take the biology test to graduate. They will either be given 3 points because they've already taken and passed the course. Now,
Okay.
that's the key part. The key word there is passed. If a
Right.
student fails biology and takes it again next year, they're going to have to take the biology
Okay.
test.
Okay.
So, you know, that there's an impetus there. Excuse me. To pass the biology course.
Yeah.
We've also seen, and they haven't made up the rules for this yet in terms of releasing it to everybody, that they were going to base that score on the student's grade in the course, which I can offer a lot of commentary on that if you want me to. But I think that's wholly unfair to compare grades from all these different schools and all these different teachers across the state and then base a student's graduation score on that. So I would be very surprised, and we have advocated, and Matt has advocated as well, you know, to different people that that's ridiculous. Just let them move along. So the testing process, there are 2 test segments that combined make one test score. The first one that are coming up here in February, and the actual start date for us is February 18th, are the performance-based assessments. You hear them called PBAs. They're allegedly given 75% of the way through the school year. If you do the math where we are right now, I would say we are not 75% of the way through the school year, but that's the window that we have. And we have to give it we have a 25-day window. We have to choose 20 consecutive days within that window to give these assessments for the PBA. So we're not starting the first day, but we're not ending the last day either, because you don't want to run up against, you know, the end of March and who knows what the weather is going to be like. The performance-based assessment is exactly what it sounds like. It is a performance. There are application questions. Some are computer scored that are more multiple choice-like, although they may not be multiple choice. They may be like drag and drop an answer into a box or something like that. So it's this online testing environment allows for a little easier scoring of certain things, but it's not necessarily multiple choice. But there are written responses in every section, and those are going to be human scored. That is really no different than the OAAs and the OGTs and the APs of the past, because all of those have written components that have been human scored for years. So that's really not much of a change. In fact, some of our teachers have served on AP scoring committees in the past. Gives them wonderful insight into what people are looking for, and it's great professional development for them as well, because they get to meet other educators in those subject areas. The end of year assessment, or UI, is given 90% of the way through the year. That's at the end of April and early May. That will be mostly computer scored, so in the future, there's a very quick turnaround for that. This year, the norming process that Jeff mentioned is going to take us into the fall before we get any results. So they'll give us some information about how we did on these tests, but in terms of usefulness to start the school year, there's none. We're not going to have any information about these assessments. It's the first year, it's the norming year, and we have to be patient until we get those results back. We are giving all of these tests online, and that was a decision that we made as a district. There's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, it's a safe harbor year. Number two, if anybody thinks that paper and pencil tests are going to be around in 10 more years, I would argue vehemently in the wrong other direction. So might as well get ahead of the curve and learn how to operate in that environment so that we're better prepared for the future. Staff preparation, this really began 4 years ago with unpacking and scaffolding state standards. We've done a lot of training on new test protocols and policy, the access to the different layout, the different tools used. One of the biggest things that's been barrier to the student preparation is some of these things have not been available just until recently. And I'll give you a perfect example. The math PBA is going to be given on February 18th, starting in this district. We just got what a sample one might look like that a few weeks ago. So, and some of the rules have changed, especially for students with accommodations. It seems like weekly Gwen's getting an email that she's passing on to me about how this testing is going to change in the accommodations. So it's been a very haphazard process at times. But we've muddled our way through. We've communicated those to the staff. The best practice moving forward is to embed sample questions and questions like it into their instruction. We haven't always been able to do that this year. That's that fine line between are you test prepping, or are you preparing students for the format and layout of the test? And there's a very much a gray area just because they haven't had the resources from the state, park, or air as they've gotten to that point. So that will be better moving forward. It's been a little rushed this year at times. I love this. This is a sample building schedule. This is what the high school put together for a day of testing on February 23rd and 24th. So I want to point out a few things to you because I think it's my opinion that the principals have done a great job of maximizing instruction time. The biggest thing with testing is you just don't want to have it impact your entire day. You've got 25% of your kids testing, but you got 75% of students that are still having class, and for the students that are testing, it only impacts 3/4 of their day. So how do you make a normal day? Well, number one, you designate certain areas where you're testing and have those specific areas be testing areas only, so that you're not having kids moving in and out of testing areas with computers there that you have to worry about test security and all these different policies. These are designated test areas across the top row here. The second thing you do is you don't test kids at the same time every single day. So if you look here, we've got Algebra 1, Runyon 7th period is going to test during the first and second portions, and Mrs. Runyon has class during that time, so Mr. Carpenter is going to proctor that test so she doesn't miss the instruction with the regular class, and those students will test first and second that were in their 7th period class. The next day, turning around, these students will flip-flop 8th and 7th period, so that most of them will miss 8th period one day and 7th period the other, but they won't miss 7th period both days and 8th period none. Will they miss some instruction here? Absolutely. And this is not a foolproof system. The principals have done a very, very good job of setting these up so that we are maximizing instruction time, but it's not perfect. I'll give you one specific example. We've got some issues with sharing students between who transport from GIS to GMS that we're really trying to work out so that we don't lose their instructional time, and we may have to do some different things testing wise with those particular students. So it's never a perfect system, but we're looking at it from the right direction in terms of how do we maximize the student's day and not make it too much of a burden for them to get this testing. The other thing is you want to test in the morning. You don't want to test after lunch. I don't think I need to explain why, but you just don't want to test after lunch. You want to get it done in the morning. So that's what a sample building schedule looks like. Kind of interesting in terms of how this all works out, and the principals have done a great job putting all the work into this. Assessments are an important part of the balanced assessment system, and Jeff talked about the different types. Really for us, the purpose of it is to improve practice and make student-centered decisions. As we get into this safe harbor piece, before we get into that, it's really just about this culture of inquiry. It's on a different slide later on after this, but it makes us ask questions so that we continually get better. I think that's the biggest reason for the assessment piece. The classroom level assessments are great. They give us the most information, but they also have the most variability. Whereas the state level tests maybe don't always give us the most information about individual kids, but they have the least variability. So they all play an important role in how we move our district forward. The safe harbor piece is House Bill 7. Not really much to add there. I think we've kind of hit all those pieces. I would focus on this right here. We will not have any student placement based on new assessments for this school year, or I should say based on this new assessments that were given this school year for the next school year. So we're really looking at really getting useful data from this two years from now is when we'll first have that information available to us.
If it passes.
If it passes.
In its current form.
Exactly. So how do we plan on using this data from these new tests? First of all, it's just one piece of data. It is a piece of a very large puzzle that we have. And we walk into that mindset. We get data from all over the place. Some of it's quantitative, some of it's qualitative. This is one piece of the puzzle. We have no plans right now to use this for gifted or special ed identification. We want to use our local measures that are tried and true, that we've been using for years. And even if we were required to by the state, we would hope that we would not be forced to use them in isolation, because one test does not paint a picture for any student in terms of their strengths and weaknesses. So that's our plans moving forward, but obviously the state's going to have a lot to say about that, and we're going to have a lot to say to the state about that process as well. And then finally, across the state, and across a lot of the states that are in the PART consortium especially, there's been this idea of opting out of the test. So I think it's important for me to establish, state law requires us to give that test to students in that grade. If we don't give those students that particular test, then a certain Mr. Brown sitting at that table will lose his license. So, and then he would no longer be able to be principal. So if we really want to sabotage his career, I guess we could not give that student.
Principal or superintendent.
Yeah. But we are actually required by law to give them. So it falls, he is the leader of the school district, it falls on him. However, we also respect the right of parents to opt out of testing. We do have a process in place. So if people are interested, we have had great conversations with some families and some more to come. There is some information out there that's not completely accurate, so it's an opportunity to make sure that we're all operating from the same set of beliefs. And then, it's their right to make that decision moving forward. We have to document that, though, because the state will ask, why didn't the student take the test? And we can't just say, well, we just didn't give it to them. We have to have a signed document from the parent saying, you're not allowed to give my child that particular test. So there does need to be a formal process for that as well. Very quick overview. Any questions that I can answer moving forward?
You mentioned that students who are accelerated take the test for the class that they're accelerated into, as opposed to their grade level one, and not both, which is great, right? How does that, it seems like we have a fair number of students that accelerate through various subjects. How does that relate to, like, ultimately what's reported? It seems like we're reporting kids' scores at sort of not the right level to their age, but to what their curriculum is, and I'm not sure how that propagates through, whether they're at higher levels or lower levels.
Sure, there are
what's the
different
impact
levels
there?
of that reporting. For example, at the teacher level, the teacher who teaches that student, regardless of what grade they're in, is tied to that particular student. So if you have a 7th grader taking geometry and a sophomore taking geometry, and they have the same teacher, their data is part of that teacher's value-added score. At the building level, there are some questions that are going to be answered yet that we don't know the answer to. For example, if we have high school level courses that the students in middle school, will that count towards the middle school growth or the high school? Right now it's the middle school. It counts towards the school that they currently reside in for their home grade, if you will. So for us, it's K3, or K3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 12 for the 4 different buildings.
So from a reporting basis, it does connect to their original grade effectively, right?
Not their grade, their subject.
There's their grade level, though? I mean, so.
Grade level, yes.
Grade level.
Correct, for the building
Right, so if you
overall
see growth in terms of what's happening in 8th grade, that could be because of some students that are taking classes at the high school.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
But the teacher level will,
Right.
regardless of what grade they're in, it won't matter.
Okay.
And Performance Index now has the PI plus, so that is an attempt to give credit, so to speak, to kids that are in advanced grade levels, taking higher level coursework.
So that's a component of the PI plus
Correct.
ranking?
Is that accurate, Ryan?
Correct, and that's
Okay.
the buildings that are gonna see the most out of that PI plus are going to be the middle school and intermediate school.
Yeah.
The elementary, there's not enough tests, and it's too early in that process to really have a lot of acceleration. The intermediate school, grades 4, you see a little bit. Grades 5 and 6, you see significantly more, and then 7, 8 is, in terms of the number of WEPs, if you're familiar with that, written plans for acceleration and written plans for having students take advanced courses, we've seen an exponential increase based on the new testing this year because of the different standards that are now taught at different grade levels. We've had to do some shifting there so that students are taking the assessment that relates to their instruction. And that's been most prevalent in Math 8, pre-Algebra B, which is taking the Math 8 test.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is going, see you, Mike. Drive carefully.
Take care, good night.
All right,
Take care.
we'll see you. All right, I'm going to be very short. The fundraising policy, I discussed it at the last board meeting. I'm including 14 other elements to the policy beyond the 3 that are currently embedded in the administrative guidelines. I didn't have it here because my computer crashed, so I'm rebuilding that as, you know, probably tonight. So really, again, what we're trying to do is get the alignment to the district mission, vision, values, really clean up the accounting aspect of the money distribution and flow, and then have a point person in Mike's office, Donna Fouch, who will be meeting with the advisors up front and making sure that the process is followed with fidelity. That being said, it is still a broader conversation about the amount of fundraising activity, and I think that's going to be an ongoing conversation. So this is the first read. Second read will be in March, and we will start our March first read of all of the other policies that need to change that we just got from OSBA as well. Russ?
Yeah, you mentioned the sort of the 2 aspects of this, the process and then the amount.
Mm-hmm.
When do you envision that we address that second issue, the amount of scale of fundraising, and how do you do that?
I think what I'm hoping to do is have next year serve as a baseline to really have people follow the new process and see what that does to either reinforce some activities or eliminate some because they don't meet the criteria. And so use that as a baseline, and then, you know, the following year, I would like the board to have a conversation about what parameters that they would like to put. Because there are ways to structure fundraising activities differently for a district. And which would potentially eliminate the multiple charitable events. And again, I think we want to recognize that we appreciate everything that Brad and Fred Wolf do in the booster organizations. We're not trying to impact that because, you know, as Jeff Gill spoke to you the last time, you know, fundraising is an avenue to provide some of the resources that the school district can't provide on a regular basis. So we want to be cautious of that as well.
Just follow up to Preston's question. So that is the entry point then, that next year piece of tying all of this to the mission and the service money piece and all of that?
Yep. Absolutely.
I just want to make sure it's still in the
Yes.
offer somewhere.
It is.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Board discussion on Economic Sustainability Summit. Can I start?
Yep.
Okay, just to give you an update, we met as several stakeholders on Friday and talked a little bit about what the next steps, and Katie, thank you very much for typing all of those up for me and providing that information. That was very helpful.
Did I miss them?
No, it was spot on, and it was very consistent with what the other entities referenced. And really what we did was we tried to limit, because there was probably 4 or 5 different meetings embedded in that, the next step. So we limited it to understanding of the tax aggregate. So really giving the opportunity to talk about taxation in the aggregate, and then specifically property tax and what goes to what entity for what reason. So the village, Steve Stillwell, and the township, Jerry Miller, will do kind of the first portion of the meeting, really understanding who is taxed for what and where their money is going. The second piece that we thought was critical that really drives another piece of the conversation is the understanding of the comprehensive plan. So we're going to have a person come and talk a little bit about the elements of the comprehensive plan and give some time for review. There are a lot of people that were at the first summit that didn't necessarily realize that we had a comprehensive plan. So we're going to go through a process of reviewing that document, which really will lead us to that next conversation of what does Granville want to be. And so there were comments about, what is the future direction of the school district or of the community? Do we want to be a bedroom community? Do we want to have a hybrid or a mix? Or, what do we really want to be? And I think some of the answers fall within the comprehensive plan. So that's really what we're trying to do. So Monday, March 9th, I'm slowing down for you, Chuck. At the Granville Middle School Project Center, 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. We will host that forum. It's a little bit different format because we'll have the ability to have small group tables, a little less formal than the auditorium. So March 9th, 7 to 9 at the Granville Middle School Project Center. We're going to send out, I'm sorry? The Project Center is attached to the library. It's that big open space. We're going to send out the invitations that we did for the first summit, but we're also going to communicate, hopefully via the Sentinel and other forums, that this is an open dialogue with the community. We really want to encourage the booster organizations, PTO, GEF, all of those entities that support the schools on a regular basis to come and have that conversation as a broader community. So that frames any additional discussion that you would like to have.
I've been getting inquiries just from people who have been interested in what the conversation was about, what the goals are, and what has happened, what happened, exactly. So it's a good conversation. It's resonating.
Good, good. Yeah, I think if I walked away with one thing from that first summit, it was the importance of developing shared understanding of our current reality.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Our meeting.
Granville community.
I think you're exactly right. We'll see it at the next meeting, but certainly every entity is facing economic challenges. Highlighted earlier in my discussion about the governor's budget, there is a definitive shift to local communities to take on a broader share of funding programs that used to be in the province of the state. It's not just impacting the schools, it's impacting the townships, impacting the village. And so I think it's a very worthwhile discussion to sort of bring in a broad understanding of how our property taxes are divvied up
Yeah.
on various needs. And then hopefully into a discussion about what, if anything, we can do to be proactive about that. And the economic sustainability issue is not just a school issue. Certainly from our perspective, it's a huge issue as it relates to schools. But it's not just a school issue, it's a community issue. I second what you said. I would really hope that we would see even more folks turn out next time. I was pleased with the amount of folks who came out last time. But I'd love to see more folks in the community, various organizations, people who are interested, people who have input. This is a real opportunity to create a broader understanding and then become proactive.
Somebody remind me how many people were there, you all know, from the village council? I know Connie Barsky was there and
The mayor,
the mayor, and
there were 3, I believe.
I think it would be really interesting with the fact that the comprehensive plan is on the agenda to have a number of different council members be
Represent.
able to share kind of what went into figuring out the plan, and because they did make some decisions about direction, obviously, that would be interesting to see if that was unanimous, if there were a couple of different kinds of plans, and this one ended up being the one that was the way that the village decided to go, because that may help shed light on the rest of the conversation that we're trying to perform.
The plan is to have a council member share the comprehensive plan portion.
But just a council?
Well,
member?
I mean, one person as the point, but then as many council members and township representatives that can shed light on the thinking process involved. I think that would be helpful.
I think there's a number of community members that would have a great historical perspective on that, and I think it's kind of changed quite a bit. And some of the undercurrents that were present when that was formed were probably different than those of today. I'm not sure what the date exactly was of that, but I know it was a long process to create.
It was initiated in 2006 and completed in 2012.
Okay, so it took some time and went through some effort, and I remember there was a lot
Government
of
at
community
its best.
discussion in that process. Right? And so what ultimately came out of that, I think, represented a lot of different perspectives, and hopefully many of them show up there. That's a good point.
Well, and I think there were some interesting people who are relatively newcomers. It's always a relative term in Granville because decades instead of considered a newcomer. So, but there were some really interesting perspectives that people who've been here a few years who work in various sectors had to share as well. So I thought it was very interesting to hear all those different pieces. It was good to get them out.
Well, and I think it was interesting, after the conversation and the end of the meeting, people stayed around and talked with people they hadn't really interacted with prior. And I think that's what a community needs to do. And so to your point, Katie, having the perspective of people that have been here for years and then relative newcomers, I think is important in developing that shared understanding.
Seeing other people's experiences in other places too. I think is interesting to dialogue.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
At this point in the meeting, we would like to entertain public comments. If you'd like to address the board, please come to the podium, state your name and your address, and you can speak for 3 to 5 minutes.
Come on, Tanya. Come on.
Carla, anything?
Nobody?
Carla?
Speaking for me.
So moving on to board reports. Just quickly, legislatively, I think we've,
Beaten the dead horse.
Yeah, beaten that one into the ground, so we don't really need to give any other updates there. Just, a couple quick things about CTEC. They've been highlighted a couple times in the local press recently. One about their wellness center, which originally was created, the community can come, but it was really created for medical assisting students to get in their clinical hours. But it's actually turned into a wellness center for staff and students as well. And so there was an article highlighting companies that provide these kinds of wellness opportunities within their organizations. And so the CTEC is highlighted as one of those organizations. CTEC also received an Auditor of State award for a clean audit, as I think we did also. So that was nice. And then I guess recently, one of the pieces of graduation is acquiring or passing approved industry credential tests. And so they have, the state has now come out with a partial list of what, and this is for the class of 2018 and beyond, so I guess they have a little bit of time. But Joyce Mullaney is involved in those efforts to advocate for making sure that, all the credentials, because some of the credentialing that our students do aren't currently listed, I think. And so she's just very much involved in that effort to make sure that, that list of tests is what it should be. So just a couple of highlights there. But other than that, we haven't met since the beginning of January, so, and that was mostly organizational meeting and things like that. So
Joyce has done a nice job collaborating with the county schools in relationship to that career counseling and career guidance portion of the Ohio Revised Code. So I know that she's met with Ryan and several others on pretty frequent basis, just trying to provide some information about what CTEC offers and what we can do at 7th and 8th grade as well.
Because that's new.
Yes, it's a new requirement.
Requirement.
So it's nice to have her
For sure.
information, so.
Katie, any updates?
I just wanted to share something that Mike shared in one of the later bits after our meeting, but I didn't actually say to you all with the meeting that we had for the New York Granville Community Authority. They're going to use their funding this year to replace the bus garage for the district. So, and then the other portion of the money that they have in the budget this year will go towards technology. And a little bit towards some key installation. So I just wanted to put that out for public record.
Thank you.
Those are fantastic contributions.
Thomas?
The GEF had a very successful end of year and fall fundraising campaign, raising over $13,000 in donations from the community, and is looking forward to a spring grant cycle. As in the past couple of years, they have 2 cycles per year where staff members and others can write grants up for consideration. Those applications are due in early April. And so I sense continued willingness from the GEF to support all kinds of great projects here, and I think there's also opportunities to do above and beyond that. You know, as we start to identify things through the innovation process and more, I think there's bigger projects that they're willing to step up and looking forward to helping out with. So
Excellent.
yeah.
Thank you.
That's it.
Okay. All right, that takes us to the action agenda. Action item 10.01, we have several overnight field trips. A couple to highlight, our Latin students are planning a trip to Italy. And we have several students, 33, including one very special daughter of mine, going to Costa Rica for the Global Summit. So,
Motion to approve.
yep.
Second? How many students from the Latin Club to Italy, do you know?
They don't know yet,
Okay.
specifically.
Mhm.
They're hoping that they can get quite a few. Cost is right.
Any other questions? Take questions, please.
Ms. Deeds? Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Denise?
Aye.
Dr. Rentow? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yep.
Dr. Carmen?
Aye.
Okay, the next item. Mr. Durst, would you like to stand up, please? I just didn't want to waste your evening and not have you stand up. Is for the hiring of the GHS principal for 2015-16 and actually a 2-year contract. Okay, so moved in second. Wow, that might be the fastest. Russ. Right, yeah. Well, wait a second.
Any questions? Any comments? Any, no, okay. Take the roll, please.
Ms. Deeds? Mr. Denise?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Rentow?
Okay, now we can talk.
Aye.
What's that?
You want to wait till I vote?
Oh, I thought you said yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
You had a majority. You had a majority.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought you did. I got excited.
No, what can you say? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so, on behalf of the administration, and I know the board, and they can speak for themselves, we're very excited about your tenure that's beginning and has actually already begun. So, I think you've handled the transition very well. I've said this multiple times, you've had big shoes to fill that were actually really small. And so, sorry. And we're looking forward to your continued leadership and taking Granville High School even further than it already has been. So, thank you. Okay.
Moving on.
All right. 10.03 is the Granville High School Assistant Principal for 15-16. Motion to approve Scott Carpenter.
So moved. So moved.
So moved, and then Russ, second. And
Any questions or comments? Could you take the roll, please?
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Denise? Dr. Rintel? Ms. Deeds? Dr. Corn?
Aye.
okay, I think what's unique is you are always looking for a person to complement yourself. An example of that is in this superintendent, you have a person that's an elementary principal at heart. And so I found a complement in Mr. Bernath, who is an expert at the high school level. Mr. Durst and Mr. Carpenter also are that unique blend where Matt is very well adept at, looking at the big picture and understanding students and motivating students and the guidance counseling background, and Mr. Carpenter just came out of the classroom as a mathematics instructor, and so that blend is really what I think makes a team very strong. So I'm looking forward to a lot of great work from both of them.
I think we should give Mr. Carpenter a round of applause.
Yes.
Congratulations. I know you're not watching, but congratulations.
All right. Item 10.04, we are approving the 2015-16 school calendar.
So moved.
All right. This calendar is different. As we talked at the last board meeting, we have removed all of the early dismissals from this calendar and moved them to the beginning of the calendar for the teachers. So we'll have multiple days of professional development. And then we've built in some additional days within the calendar that extend long weekends where we typically had students that were missing for one reason or another. We kind of tacked on to low attendance days as well. We're looking at this as a way to really maximize the professional development time that we have with teachers and make it very beneficial, while also maximizing student instructional time. So we're looking forward to this new calendar.
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds? Mr. Denise?
Aye.
Dr. Rintel? Dr. Corn?
Aye.
Okay, the next item is 10.05, the Granville High School course book.
So
Second.
Okay, a couple of comments. Basically, the tweaks that were made were enhancements to course offerings. We did not necessarily take any away, but we are building on some of the existing programs and offerings.
And this includes the new classes that are ordered?
Yes. And
That are
Mr.
being
Dirt,
added?
what's that? Yes.
Yeah.
New courses are being added
Great. I had a quick question about...
within the same staffing.
Right. One of the classes is pre-AP Algebra 2,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
How does that fit in the overall curriculum flow relative to previously Algebra 2? Does that lead to something different than analysis, or how did that fit in?
It will precede analysis. So it's going to be offered the same sequence as it was before. What we're doing is we're adding, similar to a pre-AP English 9 or a pre-AP English 10, we're adding the pre-AP level to the Algebra 2. It's existed for geometry for a number of years, but this year we decided we would add it all to the Algebra 2.
Does it change the curriculum or the depth or the content matter that's
All of
covered
the
to some
above.
extent? Does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to cover the traditional Algebra 2 course in about 3/4 of the school year.
Okay.
So it's moving at a much quicker pace, greater depth. But then what it also does is it adds time at the end of the school year for the additional things that Sue will build into it.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I actually have a question. I just know that I'm asking out of pure ignorance. Some of the pre-AP courses, there's not an AP course then later, like pre-AP geometry and then there's geometry. So is that just because that's how they're labeled and
Yeah.
you can take an AP geometry exam having taken that geometry class, but there's no.
There's
label
no
on
such
that?
thing as
Yeah,
geometry, is
there's
there?
no AP geometry exam. It started with the English courses as the pre-AP. So the first pre-APs we offered were in the English area that led then to an AP English 11, which does have that AP exam. So instead of removing went with that branded name.
So it's an honors class.
Yes,
like that.
exactly.
Just
Honors,
being
correct.
safe, he still
That would be
lists it
another
for
name that you could do,
purposes of
yeah.
academic.
You're exactly right.
Great.
Take roll, please.
Mr. Janice? Mr. Miller?
Hi.
Dr. Rintel? Ms. Deeds? Dr. Cornyn?
Aye.
Thank you. 10.06 is an unpaid leave of absence from March 23rd to March 27th.
So moved.
All right, we'll go Amy and
I'll
then
second
Thomas.
that.
All right.
Thank you.
Take roll, please.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Rintel? Aye. Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Dr. Cornyn?
Aye.
Okay. We have several maternity leave requests.
So moved.
Second.
Motion. Thomas? Roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Dr. Rintel? Dr. Cornyn?
Aye.
Thank you. The next item is 10.08, which is the Fuel Up to Play 60 grant approval.
So moved.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Mr. Janice? Dr. Rintel? Dr. Cornyn?
Aye.
Did Mrs. Splatter
Yeah.
write that grant?
She did. So
That's fantastic.
Barb, who was recognized earlier, wrote that grant, and it is for $3,900 to fund a smoothie machine for her FCCLA classroom.
Cool.
Fancy machine you're
Oh, and that's half the cost. I mean, they are expensive.
I had a smoothie at the garden with actually things from the garden at an
Yeah.
event this past summer. I think her people put together. It was wonderful, right? And
Yeah.
It seems like the kids really got into the components and how they worked, and it was really neat. And if it's a grant, then more power to her.
What, the beet one? Didn't it have beet in it?
There were a couple different versions
Yeah.
and flavors and things like that. They were really cool.
Okay. 10.09, leave of absences. We have several.
So moved.
Second.
Take roll.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Dr. Rintel? Ms. Deeds? Dr. Cornyn?
Aye.
Excellent. Okay, the next item is a resolution preserving the provision of the Ohio Constitution. Once we get a motion, I will talk a little bit more about that.
No?
Okay. All right, so there has been talk in communities, or at least at the General Assembly, about removing the provision of the thorough and efficient clause of the Ohio Constitution. That clause was seminal in the conversation around the DeRolf case, and really what qualifies as adequate funding and what their obligation as a state is to provide. And so there is a resolution that we are signing on to from BASA that really states that we are preserving that thorough and efficient clause because we believe it is critical to the state's obligation to provide a thorough and efficient educational system.
So this is the state's solution to the school funding problem.
Correct. Great. Yes. Eliminate the clause, then everything goes away. Right.
Still
Exactly.
out there.
So after you approve this resolution, we'll have Dr. Cornyn sign it, and we will send it to all of our representatives and senators at the General Assembly.
Take roll, please.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Rintel? Aye. Dr. Cornyn?
Aye.
Okay, 10.11 or 10.11, we are authorizing the resolution of the purchase of gas service.
So moved.
Okay. Just to give you a little background, we have been in this consortium with MEC for several years to purchase gas. This is the new contract, which is, again, at a lower price than we're currently engaged in. So that consortium purchasing has been advantageous to us, and we hope that that continues into the future. And this goes for the next 2 years.
Any questions? Take roll, please.
Miller?
Aye.
Got those backwards, sorry.
That's just fine.
Dr. Rintel? Ms. Deeds? Dr. Cornwell?
Okay. The next item is the consent agenda, 11.01A through B4.
Motion?
So moved?
Okay, what I'd like to do is highlight a couple of things. First of all, we have some resignations within the track program. I'd like to recognize Bob Holland, Ronald Full, and Jim Redding as outgoing track coaches. They've served for quite a few years, Granville students, and I want to recognize their service and appreciation of that service to the students.
Yeah.
And then we have new staff coming in. Jim Green is going to be the head track coach. Chrissy Rogerson, Dave Augusta, and George Brown are going to be doing the 3 assistant track coach positions. And then some of those people were in middle school positions, and so we're backfilling those positions with Jamie Rogovin, Todd Patton, and Rich Hillman. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. And then the final highlight is I have to submit this request for retirement, or actually, should I say retirement, for Kay Uckleberry in our office. Kay has served quite a long time for Granville Schools, and she is retiring at the end of June. So, with regret, but appreciation of service. Any questions or comments?
No, I'd like to thank Kay also for her service, and she's a wonderful institutional memory that hopefully we'll be able to draw upon
Yeah.
even in her retirement. So
Yeah.
I know her sense of humor will be missed.
Yes, it will, and spunk.
And spunk.
She definitely keeps me in check.
Take roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Rintel? Ms. Deeds? Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Dr. Cornwell?
Aye.
This takes us to the financial section.
You're on.
Come on. Where did Mike go? No, just kidding. Hopefully you've all had an opportunity to review the financial statement. I worked with Mike on the financial statement. January is a pretty quiet month as far as the school financial activity is concerned. Mike had originally anticipated that there would be an advance of funds on the tax collection for this period, but there was not. Actually, it was received today from the county, so that just shifted things just a little bit. But other than that, everything appears to be right in line with the targets, and overall spending is within the budgeted allocations, and I thank you for the opportunity to review that.
That's great. And thank you for your time coming in and stepping in. It's really nice to have a familiar face here and somebody that the community trusts to watch over things.
It's been very nice.
Well, the staff does it all, so I just kind of go, need anything? So.
Can we get a motion
Oh,
to
yes.
approve?
So moved.
And any other questions about the report? Can you take roll, please, Kay?
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Rintel? Ms. Deeds? Mr. Janice? Dr. Cornwell?
Aye.
Thank you. It is at this time of year that the County Budget Commission submits for approval the amounts and rates that actually have already been levied for tax bills, but statute requires that you do accept those amounts and rates.
So, second?
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Janice? Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Rintel? Ms. Deeds? Dr. Cornwell?
Aye.
The next item is the recommendation for Kennedy Cottrell Richards Accountants and Consultants for preparation of the CAFR.
So moved. I'll second that.
Amy and Thomas.
Thank you.
You're just so efficient.
They are very efficient. I know from experience in working with this firm, they're very credible. They actually are the auditors, the CPAs that audit the auditor estate's office, and two of the partners live locally here. So it's great to see that the district is using local services. So I commend you on that.
Is the rate about the same?
Yes.
Is that- Take the roll, please.
Ms. Deeds? Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Rintel? Mr. Janice? Dr. Cornwell?
Aye.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion for executive session, to enter into executive session to discuss the employment of a public employee or official. Take the roll, please.